Hello, everyone, and welcome to Piloting the Future, brought to you by Energy Central. Here on Piloting the Future, we're going deep with the leaders, the innovators, and the forward thinkers, responsible for not just imagining where our power future is heading, but building it day by day. In each episode, we go beyond the headlines to hear from the industry insiders and bold, game-changing innovators to separate the hype from reality. So, Lee, how was your week? How is everything going? I'm actually calling in today from, I think, 103 degrees in New York City.
It's been a great week. The weather's been great here in the state of Washington. I'm down near Portland. So everything's really looking good here and getting a lot of good work done. So that's good too.
Well, I'm excited about today's podcast and our guests because we're going to be talking a little bit more about trees. And let me tell you, I could really use that shade today because I got a full feel of what it's like to walk about 15 blocks on the hot concrete in the middle of Times Square and, just really starting to appreciate, this trees and cover and shade. And so for today's episode, we know utilities can have a love-hate relationship with trees. So can't we just be frenemies?
When I worked for San Diego Gas and Electric, that was the first time I realized that there was really an issue with trees and the electric system. But boy, it really is an issue. So much of the O&M budget is devoted to vegetation management. And we had a fire back in 2003, and one of the potential causes, I'm not going to say what the cause actually was. I think that was always debated. Well, the main cause was wind was blowing 100 miles per hour, which it was never supposed to do. It hadn't done that before. But one of the potential culprits was a dead branch that was outside the zone that was supposed to get trimmed. But with such excessive wind, it blew into the wires. That's one thing that might have caused it. I'm not going to lay any blame. But that's when I realized, wow, trees and the electric grid are very related.
That's right. So fasten your seatbelts. It's time to talk about trees and explore what happens when innovation moves from ideas to impact with the Arbor Day Foundation.
Yes, this episode we have Justin McQuistan, Corporate Partnerships Manager at Arbor Day Foundation, and Dennis Fallon, Executive Director at Utility Arborist Association. Justin and Dennis, welcome to Piloting the Future.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Justin, can you talk about what Arbor Day Foundation does in general and how it works with utilities?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Arbor Day Foundation is actually the largest nonprofit membership organization that's dedicated to planting trees. So our mission it's a simple one, but it's a powerful one. It's to inspire people to plant, nurture, and celebrate trees. And we do this in forests and communities. And the work that we're doing with utility partners is focused on that communities piece. So actually through our Energy Saving Trees program, which now thankfully is featured in the Innovation Works hangar, we are offering a turnkey way for utilities to distribute trees to their customers or their intended audience in more of a strategic kind of data-informed way through a sourcing and software package. So really, it's a solution rooted in science. It's leveraging geospatial technology to help customers understand that right place, right tree principle, and where on their property they need to plant trees for the greatest energy saving impact. So in our eyes, it's a win for homeowners, it's a win for utilities, and it's a win for the planet.
I love right tree, right place. I just bought this house 3 years ago, and I have a couple of stories to tell about it with regard to trees. One of them is that it has a line of Japanese red maples, Japanese blood maples, which are just beautiful trees, and it goes up along this hill. They're in a row, and the one at the very top died right after we got the house. I guess it was already dying. And so we replaced it, and I have to say, I baby that tree. I do everything I can. I water it when there's a drought, but I think it's going to struggle because I think the placement, not in the right place, is why it's having a hard time.
Lee, as much as I wish I was an arborist and knew as much as some of the most talented people on our staff are, I probably would have to find a second opinion on where the actual right place in your yard would be. But using our software, we could help you find the right place for energy savings impact.
Dennis, what does the Utility Arborist Association do, and how do you work with the Arbor Day Foundation?
So the Utility Arborist Association is a professional association, membership or organization for the folks who balance our energy supply and nature. Come to us for continuing education. We work on the things that transcend competitive bounds: education, safety, environmental sustainability. Provide a network for professionals to interact with each other, learn from each other, and go out and improve their programs to help the communities that they serve. We partner with the Arbor Day Foundation for a major conference that we do annually to recognize Treeline USA, the Trees and Utilities Conference held annually. This year it'll be late September. It'll be September 9th through the 11th in Knoxville, Tennessee. So if folks want to come out there, largest gathering of utility vegetation managers on the planet. Fun place to be. Great folks. Arbor Day will be there along with us, along with 1,500 of your closest friends as well. So we partner with them to help spread the message around environmental stewardship and how to get the correct tree in the correct place, because having the wrong tree in the right place or the right tree in the wrong place can be a problem for whether it's your utility, it could be for all sorts of things, visibility. So getting the right tree in the right spot gives you the success you're looking for. Just like you described before with the tree you're nurturing right now, making sure you've got it where it belongs, where it's going to strive and be complementary to your landscape instead of cause you more maintenance. You want to have it reduce costs and reduce maintenance.
I was at an AI conference here in New York, Utility Cloud event. And so I was telling everybody about this podcast. And so everyone is so excited. So here we are, a bunch of AI technologists, a lot of utility AI technologists, and they could not wait to hear more about this solution. And so I got a few questions. When you guys were talking about right place, right tree, we're thinking about energy efficiency. Do you guys also think about fire resistance or anything there that could be preventative for any maybe harmful events that homeowners may have? Or I know at one point you even were explaining to me about the importance of soil and making the right decisions for placement of trees with soil. So I was wondering, tell me a little bit more about this science and, does it go beyond energy efficiency into other benefits?
If you're speaking specifically to the utility forest, which is that subset of the forest that's near utility infrastructure, whether it's pipeline or wires, even our roadways be part of our utility infrastructure, water supplies. The short answer is yes. All those things come into play. Depending on where you live, your risk for fire is different and what's going on in those facilities or in those particular areas, and then the interaction type. So you have different risk profiles. But all of that comes into a utility vegetation manager's mind when they're out there working on their facilities, and they're looking to come up with the lowest risk profile and deliver the highest quality product that they can get out there. So society has moved to a highly energized situation right now, and there's as much conversation right now about power quality as there is power quantity. We've got plenty of power. The slight interruptions, you think about even just the podcast we're recording now, the slightest interruption would put a glitch in how this all goes. A lot of video conferencing that happens out there. We have a lot of equipment out there that's highly sensitive to interruption and to do touches or even brownouts where it's getting voltage dips. So these kinds of things are definitely kept in mind when they're managing the utility forest.
I love that term, utility forest. Wow. That's a new one for me, and it's very appropriate. Justin, can you talk about some of the successes that you've had?
So when we talk about successes, we're talking about, I like to think maybe back up is tree distributions can be a solution for a lot of utility objectives. So utility partners, they're focusing on strengthening their customer engagement. They're looking to expand energy efficiency opportunities or even community improvement through a tree replacement, which connects them back to environmental sustainability. So across our partnerships, we get to work with these hundreds of forward-thinking utilities, and those results have been phenomenal. So one, for example, is one of our major utility partners has distributed over 80,000 trees in the past 12 years. So if you think about that, that's leading to measurable energy savings for their customers. It's lowering peak demand on the grid. And homeowners love this program, right? It's approachable, it's personable, and it has that tangible environmental benefit that, the community is looking for.
Dennis, where has your company added the most value to utilities, do you think?
Well, we focus on the things that transcend competitive bounds that all utilities are working on. So our members are from all over North America. We've got members, actually, we're represented by 23 different countries. So things like safety, regulatory review, industry norms, those are the areas that we focus on. Trying to balance that. How do we get nature engaged in here and do well by because our communities, we live in our communities for reasons, and these attributes add value to our quality of life. And the utilities that serve those communities want to make sure they live there too. Those folks are living and operating in these communities. They want a high quality environment to live and operate in. So solutions like the Arbor Day's energy saving tree solutions help those utilities put power into their consumers' hands on making good choices and getting educated in advance before they think about, what's my landscape going to look like? Decisions made in the landscape today may not manifest into conflicts for multiple years as those trees continue to grow and fill out the space that they're genetically programmed to have over time. So having a good plan at the beginning, knowing how large a tree is going to be, knowing what the shape of that tree is going to look like, knowing whether it's compatible for your area in the first place, understanding how it reacts with the environment, all of that needs to be calculated in advance and thought about in advance, and then worked into a plan so that you can minimize risk and maximize your output potentials and your environmental services from those trees. Those are the areas that our organization tries to help plug people in.
I just love that concept of making sure that you're looking at the future growth of the tree and what it's genetically programmed to look like in the future. That's really, really brilliant stuff. It seems that utilities don't really compete against each other. So this is the perfect place to have lessons learned shared as much as possible.
Yeah, completely agree. And that's it's one of the industries that's very nice because there is a lot of sharing that goes on as to what successes look like. And again, we focus on things that don't necessarily, or the things that transcend the competitive bounds. So it's a lot easier to talk about those items with your peers. Where have I had successes, and then where have I seen pitfalls, and share that information.
Yeah, I love that. Justin, how do you strike a balance between communities, utilities, and landowners?
I think really the key to it is community empowerment, in my opinion. So from the utility side, it's not just providing like a technology, it's making sure that the people, as Tim said, who live in that area are central to like what the planning is, the decision making, and the ownership of it. Energy to me isn't just about power. It's about the agency, it's about the equity, and it's about the sustainability of it all.
I would even add on to that, and I agree with everything Justin's saying there. The two organizations do a nice job of providing global level information and a body of knowledge that can be used at a local level. Energy consumption, energy placement, all need to be made at a local level. How are you going to manage your natural resources? What works for your neighborhood? Those are decisions that need to be made in the community, in the place where that's going to occur. So the Arbor Day Foundation, Utility Arborist Association work to provide a global knowledge base and access to that global knowledge base that local experts can apply in their area.
I'm curious about that just a little bit more. I mean, dive in a little bit more, explain a little bit more of that to us. And Justin, you had mentioned about the sourcing piece. So can you break it down like step by step? How do people get the value out of the knowledge database?
Yeah, I think as far as sourcing is, we want to make sure that we are, through our program specifically, offering trees that are appropriate for the climate or the region of the country that we're in. It's one of the major things. And one of the benefits of working with the Arbor Day Foundation is our ability to connect and convene. And we have a very large growing network all over the country. And we're able to work with them to provide viable tree options to our utility partners. So we will provide them with a list of available trees that are appropriate for their region. And ultimately, we let the utility decide what they want to put out in their community. They are the ones in the community, as I mentioned, we're not always located in that spot, so we don't know what's best. And they have a really good understanding of what their canopy may look like. And ultimately, they also could decide if they want a small, a medium, or a large tree. We think of utility-friendly trees. We don't want a tree to go onto a private property residence that's just going to grow up into the line and have to be pruned or even removed in the future. We want to educate the homeowner on what is the appropriate tree for my yard, and we do that in a lot of different ways. So we're going to provide them with information on what is the mature spread of the tree you're looking at, what is the mature height. We're constantly reminding them to dial 811 before they dig, to check for overhead power lines on their property. All this is important when we're educating the end user, but also working with our utility partners. And then we get the kind of the fun part. We use iTree technology, and we calculate a lot of really cool and relevant data points. So we're calculating the energy savings number. So actually in our software, homeowners can actually take the tree and drag it around their property. And as they're plotting that tree, it's going to show them what the estimated energy savings look like in a dollar value. So it's calculating kilowatt hours that are projected to be reduced at full maturity of that tree. But with trees, there's more benefits than energy savings. In a strategically placed tree, we're calculating carbon sequestration, so CO2 numbers. We're calculating air pollutants gathered. We're calculating stormwater runoff. This is allowing our partners then to tell a greater story of what the community impact is that this program is having on them.
This might be an inappropriate question, so if it is, we'll just delete it. You don't have to try to answer it, but just in case, I'm going to ask it. I live along the Columbia River Gorge, and there's huge amounts of pine trees that are totally dried out and dead that take up a huge area of acreage, along the mountains. Do you have any thoughts about what's going on there and what we can do about that?
Well, if they're dead and taking up acreage, it would probably, and I'm not an arborist, so maybe it is important we don't leave this in. But I mean, in my knowledge is it would probably be appropriate to have those trees removed, recycle that wood, and then have a team come out and replant that area with appropriate reforestation.
Yeah, well, a couple of things when you talk about that scenario. The one thing about forests that we need to keep in mind is forests are constantly changing. And they're not you can't preserve a forest. Preservation means to hold something in its current state. So it's always going to be in that state. And forests are living organisms, and not just the trees. You've got other living organisms that are interacting, that are moving through there in that scenario. So they're advancing and changing, and there's been changes over time. A lot of what we see manifest, Kim mentioned it earlier, like wildfire and some of these things. You also mentioned wildfire earlier. We're faced with a society, right, wrong, or indifferent, 100 years of decision-making from historic decision-making. There were forest management decisions that have been made in the past that were made before any of us were present that have created this current conditions that we're operating under right now. And we're not going to get ourselves out of these current conditions overnight. We didn't get into them overnight. So what you described there, while they don't know what the key driver is, you described forest health and forest vitality, and having folks that understand that particular forest and the interactions of that forest and what might be ailing it and what stage and successional portion it's in will help them make some management decisions on whether reforestation is the correct answer, what salvage logging, however that might be, how to minimize the risk and then get that site back to viable for what it is contributing in the environmental contributions that we're looking for, the environmental services we're hoping for, reduced runoff, increased water reception, increased oxygen, all those benefits, increased wildlife populations that we're looking out of forests. So again, it goes back to a lot of historic decision making and working our way through that decision making. And then what are we going to do moving forward? I guess, Lee, one thing to think about with that, and we talked about planning a little bit, is that's where the plan comes in. We can't go back and fix what happened before. What we can do is work with that and work to move ourselves into a different position moving forward. What we do have full control over is what decisions do we make now. So those trees that maybe were planted in your community that are directly below the conductors that went in 1930 or 1940 or 1950, Those were decisions made in 1930, 1940, 1950. We can't undo those decisions. We can, however, make decisions now about what goes in underneath those facilities moving forward, or on top of those facilities, depending on where the utility is, and have that tree sited in the right spot. Get it to where it's not going to become a maintenance issue moving forward. And then, like Justin says, can we have it maximize shade on the west side of your home so that in the late afternoon, you're getting a cooling effect from that tree? Get those things sited. If you live up in the prairie areas, you're looking for a windbreak to try to cut some of that wind away from your house and have that wind move. You may be looking at DOTs put trees in specific areas so they can reduce snow loads on their highways in the winter, create a snowbank or a snow break in there. So a lot of different pieces. What we really need to focus on moving forward as a society is, where are we going? And what does that look like for us? And then how are we going to plan that to maximize the potential and minimize future maintenance costs?
And you're really talking about a century ago that decisions were made when much less was known about how nature could be planned and how it works and how we can architect a better solution. And I'm just blown away. I mean, it's so important to me that Dennis and Justin, that you make an impact on the industry so that these things are done right now that we have the capability to do them right.
Exactly. And I think that's where the tools like Justin's got available, the Intersaving Trees tool, puts that power into people's hands to get informed and get access to that. Kim asked about the global access to knowledge. It's to access that knowledge. How tall will that tree be? How wide will that tree be? What positive impacts will it have on my environment versus, and weigh those against negative impacts.
Great. Yeah, no, I was going to say this sounds like a really good segue for us to move into the next part of the podcast, which we call a visionary's take, where we like to cut through the BS and get right to the point. And on this note, for me, it's really about scaling, right? So we just talked a little bit about Justin's success, the 80,000 tree example. How do we ensure that other utilities know about what sounds like one of the best kept secrets in the industry? I think if we just get the word out, more utilities know about this. There could be like a good way to scale all of this amazing knowledge that you are sharing with us today. And so I'd love to learn, it's kind of a twofold question. I'd love to learn more about what you think about how do we cut through the BS and scale, but also as we turn to the future, a future of distributed generation. Justin and Dennis, you both shared with me that as you think about the next 100 years, what is this tree canopy in the community going to look like? So I'd love to hear your visionary take on that.
So I think the first part, I think when we think about the industry, we really need to have it start to embrace, in my opinion, nature-based solutions as a part of the energy toolkit. So what I mean by that, I think that means integrating sustainability, customer engagement, and resilience into core operations, and not necessarily treating them as afterthoughts. And when we look to what does the canopy look like in the future, I always go back to a quote, and it's the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, right? So if we continue to ignore this, we're going to continue to have this conversation of what can we do 20 years, 30 years, 40 years down the road. And another kind of big concern that is on my mind is the growing heat. You guys opened the conversation with it, urban heat islands. It's getting hotter, and it's not going to stop anytime sooner. Trees can reduce temperature by 10 to 15 degrees in the shade, and we have to plant those trees now so that the future generations can experience what that looks like.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And I think Justin hit the nail on the head there when he talks about it's a societal shift. We're talking about a paradigm shift, talking about utilizing nature positive solutions in our communities. And that requires the community to want to do that. Utilities are eager to help their communities and participate with their communities to help them achieve their goals, because oftentimes they're their goals as well, the utilities' goal as the community's goal. And if they're partnered together, they can leverage that piece. Kim, you mentioned the decentralization of our energy grid. As we, as a society, move to low carbon, no carbon energy sources and generation sources, we have a situation where we're going to move from historically, we spent 100 years building a grid where we built large power plants and we brought fuels to those power plants, and then we transmitted and distributed energy from those areas. And we're moving into where we're going to start to go to non-point source generation, where we're going to generate energy, whether it's hydro, like in Lee's area. There's a lot of hydro up in the Columbia River, or it's solar, or it's wind, or whatever that low carbon energy source is going to be that we're going to work from. Those are going to be distributed out in our communities. So these communities are going to need to make decisions on where do they need to have their nature and how are they going to balance that. Estimates are as high as doubling the grid from what we currently have in order to meet a no carbon, low carbon solution. So you think about that's twice the infrastructure that's already out there in order to go to a non-point source generation. Politics aside, that's decisions that there's a lot of natural resource decisions that need to be made associated with that. And getting people the knowledge and the tools to be able to make those decisions at a community level, that's important. That's what's going on now. So in order to scale this, we really need the buy-in. The communities need to work with their utilities to say, this is what we want to do, and this is what our future looks like, and really talk about the plans holistically, all aspects of the plan. How does nature fit into this? How does society fit into this? How does our energy fit into this? Where are we going to draw all these things from? And what works for our community?
I might be taking a step too far, but we read all these load prediction forecasts coming around demand because of data centers. Hey, utilities and data centers, get together and think about what trees you're going to plant.
What makes me nervous is that there will be in the future community microgrids that the utilities aren't necessarily associated with, which means now you have people making these decisions that don't have that experience. So it's super important that that is part of the microgrid checklist, that people do consider that and they know who to go to get help to make those decisions correctly.
Maya, we're talking about scale. We've talked about this program that the Arbor Day Foundation has. I think this is an opportunity where the Arbor Day Foundation kind of wants to, put the money on the line, basically, type of thing. And we actually, yes, we want to offer, the utility professionals, your listeners, the followers of this podcast, an opportunity to actually go out and use our tree distribution software and reserve a free tree for themselves. So the intent of this is that, the utility professionals, the followers, anybody in the country will get to actually interact with the software in real time. They can plot different tree species around their own property. They can see the different benefits that a strategically placed tree offers. That's energy savings. They can see the community impact in real numbers. And in doing so, we hope that maybe they'll consider utilizing tree distributions as a nature-based solution in their energy toolkit. And they also will get a free tree mailed out directly to their doorstep, which is just an added perk and probably the best part of it all. But I will say it is going to be limited to the first 200 participants. So don't hesitate. Make sure to go and reserve your tree if you want one. And I'll provide Kim with that information, and she can include it in the notes at the end of this.
I do have a story about my property. So we saw it 3 years ago, and the view of the river was incredible, and that's why we bought it. But then I found out that the previous owner bought it kind of as a flip because it had 30 tall trees blocking that entire view of the Columbia. He cut them all down, 30 trees. I come in, I see the view, and of course, I want to pay more because it's just incredible. But now I have this guilt, even though I didn't cut the trees down, I do have this guilt. So I do want to, I'm willing to spend money. I can't put 30 trees on my property now, but I would love to help out and have more trees that are grown on behalf of money that I donate. I just want to know that they're really going to be planted and that it's not some kind of weird scam where the trees were going to be planted anyway. I really want to make a difference. Justin, can you talk about how you guarantee that that actually happens?
Yeah, it's tough to always guarantee that through our program that a tree is going to be planted. We want to make sure that we're educated. In doing the education process, it helps to ensure that trees are going to be planted in the ground. And a lot of times we are focusing on communities and areas of greatest need. And those are the areas that don't have access to these resources and really won't take for granted the opportunity to plant a tree. But the Arbor Day as a whole, we have a lot of different programs where we're getting trees into reforestation and we are ensuring trees are getting planted. We're working in communities and we're doing follow-up and making sure these trees are surviving and continuing to grow. So we have different levers we pull, but when we're working on private property, sometimes it can be difficult to guarantee that a tree is planted and surviving. It's our hope that 100% plant and survival rate is what we are. But a lot of it will ultimately come down to a homeowner.
So how much should I donate to get 30 trees planted?
You want to get 30 trees planted and you want someone to come out and plant those trees for you?
No, I don't want to plant them at my place. I want them to find a great place.
So if we need a utility that used to, Lee, maybe one of your utilities you worked at, we can, you could provide this for them.
I'll talk to you after and we'll get this done.
Yes, I can lead that. We have a program. If you want to get 30 trees put into your community, a community of greatest need, I will put you in touch with the correct person and we will guarantee those trees. And if anybody is interested in donating to the Arbor Day Foundation, they can go to arborday.org and make a donation. There's a lot of different areas that you can choose to improve upon. So arborday.org will have fantastic information if you are interested in giving to a great cause, purchasing trees, or looking to support a project in your community or reforestation around the world.
Okay, I'm definitely in. Okay, definitely in.
Please in, and you got to make sure to read the show notes so everybody here, the first 200, get their tree and get the software. So get it while they last, everyone.
I had some rapid fire questions to ask, and this is for anyone on the call other than me, I guess. Here's the first one. What's one thing about vegetation management that nobody talks about but should?
One thing that we talk about is if we continue with our current paradigm the way we are, the $10 billion a year that we spend annually is already not enough. So we need to start planning, we need to be proactive, and we need to plan our way out of tree utility conflicts, and it can be done. And we can move to a state where we've got trees in our communities that give us all the ecological services that we need and aren't competing or conflicting with our everyday routine maintenance. All bets are off. You talked about a major storm. You get these major storms, we're going to have major storms. It's not going to prevent all maintenance. I'm not suggesting that by any means. At the same time, we can work our way out of managing trees over and over and over again to where we're only managing when we absolutely need to manage those. That's the untalked about thing.
Okay, next question. A myth about trees that you'd like to bust.
The myth that trees and power lines don't mix and the solution is to cut them down. Where in reality, it's not about removing trees, it's probably more about managing them smarter. So a lot of people think tree removal is the only way to ensure safety and reliability, but modern utility forest management, it really isn't anti-tree. And you can understand that from talking with Dennis here. It's about strategic vegetation management and the balance of grid safety and tree canopy health. So we can prune instead of clear cut. We can plant trees in the right place, choosing species that won't interfere with lines as they grow. There's so much data, mapping tools for tracking risk and managing trees with precision and not fear. And we can partner with communities to build trust, educate, and even use tree planting really as a form of community investment. So busting the myth helps shift the narrative from seeing trees as a liability to trees more as a strategic asset when managed well.
Okay, so if each of you can take on this last rapid fire question under a minute, keep the answers under a minute each. And this includes you, please answer it. And you can get away from the vegetation management tree perspective if you want for this one. What is the biggest threat to utilities over the next 5 to 10 years?
I would say right now is probably a little bit of the market and a little bit of societal's mindset. So we spend a lot of time talking about the fringe and not really talking about where the rest of us are in the middle. And we've got to make some decisions of where we want to be. And those decisions need to have all the decision makers at the table and all the folks that might have interest in that conversation at the table. I think that's the biggest threat, is continuing to operate in silos and not opening our doors for open conversation and having some critical thinking engaged with some tough conversations.
I hate to argue with Dennis. I mean, I think we keep beating a dead horse, for lack of a better word. But I agree with it. I mean, you think about capital investments into the grid. I think we're going to continue to make those. We have to think about what that impact those grids are going to have on our environment as we move forward.
Lee, I wanted to jump in here real quick too, because Justin and Dennis are really making me think these are missed opportunities. Like, you're really helping me to see that if we don't do something now, 20 years from now, that opportunity, that seed, that legacy that could have been planted today is going to be missed. And I just start thinking about it's everywhere. These missed opportunities, especially a lot of what we talk about on these podcasts with these new innovations, are it's missed if we let it go another day. So I think the biggest threat is the delay.
You could look at the past and get stuck there. You could look at the future and not do anything now, or you could focus on where we are, where we're at right now, and make it happen.
Awesome. Well, that was a lot of fun, guys. So I think Lee, it's another one. We can buckle our seatbelts. We're coming in for a landing. Thank you so much to our guests and everyone out there listening. If you found this conversation helpful or inspiring, share your own bold prediction, tag Innovation Force on LinkedIn. Tell us about a new idea or a company that you think is shaping our energy future. You never know. They may be the next guest on this show. And don't miss out on this amazing opportunity to sign up and get a tree from the Arbor Day Foundation. Thank you so much, Justin and Dennis, for coming on the show and dispelling all these myths.
You're absolutely right. Thanks for having us today.
Yeah. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Lee. Appreciate the time.